So if you want to get a job in the software business, here's what you really need to do. First of all, any place, any large company like Wells Fargo Bank, large institutions, if you really do want to get a job there, you're not going to get it by coming in through the front door. I don't care how good your resume, even if you match up to all of this, if you can do all of this, you're still not going to get through the gatekeepers. I mean, trust me, I've watched it happen. What you're going to do is you're going to get through the door by knowing people, okay? And this gets back to that community. Remember we said on an earlier slide that you have to know somebody at the company to understand what's going on with the company? This is community. You have to be involved in the community. You have to be known. You have to have people go, hey, you know what? We're hiring. I know a guy. He's pretty good. He always shows up at meetings. He knows his stuff. Let's bring him in. Let's talk to him. And they go to the hiring manager and they say, hey, I got a resume for you. We want to talk to this guy. Guess what? You just bypassed all the gatekeepers. Okay? That's how you get in and really get a job. The community is also the place where you're going to hear about jobs. Okay? And it's going to be the place where you develop your skills. Open source projects. This one is actually the toughest one to get into, but it also looks the best on the resume. Has anybody contributed to an open source project here? Joel? Okay, a couple people. All right, how do you start? Open source projects are, you think open source, anybody can contribute code. If you've ever actually tried to do that, just go to an open source project at random and contribute code, you'll find out it's not that easy, okay? The people that run the open source projects, of which I've ran a couple myself, they are very, very guarded about the code, because there's not only is this, they have to have the thing working, but there's a philosophy behind it too. And there's a culture around it. So if you want to be a submitter, you have to be known to these people. They have to know that you're following the culture, you understand the big picture, and you're going to do something that's moving the project forward, not pulling it backwards. So how do you do that? You said you did contribute?
I haven't really contributed. You start your own open source project is what you do. Okay. You throw it out there.
All right. So that's one way to do it. And has anybody done that before? Okay. You have? Okay. How widespread was the adoption of that open source project?
It's not huge per se, but it was niched into a framework. Right. It's like a framework plugin. So
right.
It's only going to be as wide as the adoption of that framework for someone who needs that kind of niche functionality.
But that's a start, and that actually looks really good on a resume. If you can point to it and say, hey, look, on the web, I built an open source tool that's part of this framework. That's what we're talking about here. How else do you get into those?
You volunteer to be a user to provide feedback to anything that's in an alpha or beta environment. And once you go into that realm, you never leave it, because they'll continually ask you if you can bring other people in to be the testers and the guinea pigs.
Yep. And that's how you really learn about the community. That's how you learn about software and big picture. Okay. That's why I've seen, and the easiest way to get under the radar is start writing documentation. Open source projects suck at documentation. It's one of the last things no developer wants to do. I want to do documentation. But it is something that's going to get you in the door, and you're not going to hit the same barriers to submitting. They're actually going to be quite grateful. They're going to be like, hey, somebody's adding documentation. This moves the project forward. This is a good thing. And then as you do that, you also become conversant with the tool enough to be able to test it. And by and by, if you stick with it, you're gonna start to submit code at different places. But it's a commitment. You can't just do a drive-by submission. It just doesn't work that way. So if you want to have the open source on your resume, which looks really good, I look very closely as soon as I see somebody's contributed an open source project. But also understand that I'm looking to see if they're full of shit too. I'm going to apologize about my language. They're full of crap. So that's one of the first things I look at, because there's a lot of people that claim it, and the reality is that there's not that many people that do it. So, but if you have it, it's very good, but it is a commitment. Okay? How many of you have running code up on the web that you can point to, or on your machine, you can point to and say, hey, look, take a look at this application. It's what we're running right now. I can tell you everything about it because I built it from the ground up. Okay, a couple people? Good. How many of you have ever seen an artist's portfolio? When an artist comes in, they have a portfolio, they have their art, it's sitting right there. Why, as software people, do we not have our own portfolio? Why do we not walk around with this? Okay, you walk in and I'm interviewing you and you show me running applications, I'm going to pay attention. Okay, you're going to get past that, well, is this person wasting my time? Okay, I pay attention to that. Showing your skills. How many of you have ever interviewed for a software development project? right, I'm gonna ask some very specific questions. Did they make you code?
Probably on the whiteboard.
Okay, so they did, like pseudocoding exercise in the whiteboard. Okay, how about you? Did they make you code?
Yeah, I've done that as well as actual having to program on something like this, which is terrible.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? I saw you had your hand up too. Did they make you
That
code?
was more on the hiring end of things.
It was what?
More on the hiring end of things that applying for.
Okay, so you're on the hiring side. Did you make people coming in? Did you make them code?
Most times we didn't, because it's pretty clear whether or not they talked about it.
Okay, all right. So if you're an airline and you're hiring a pilot, you gonna make them fly a plane before you start to, before you hire them? Probably, right? Okay. If you have a, let's say that you're working at a gentleman's club down in Las Vegas, and you're hiring you professional, okay, are you gonna make them exhibit their art?
That's probably not a good thing to comment on from an incriminating standpoint, as we're on the World Wide Web.
Right, that's right. Okay, so I retract the question, now that I'm looking at all the smiling faces.
Jonathan, if you don't mind,
Sure.
as a former banker and business consultant today, who's worked with software developers at the bank in appraisal, financial analysis, several of these things, and whose only skill in software or any of that technical is I could do a DOS and make it kick my name back to you. Right?
Yep.
We have a saying, put a taste on the tongue. And if it's that club in Vegas you're talking about, they want to have a taste on the tongue. The biggest challenge in every business I've worked in that I have with software developers is they're freaking in love with their own stuff. Don't give a crap what anybody else thinks. They know it's the best in the planet. That might be true. But if nobody tastes it, nobody's buying it. And what sells and what hires is this bring samples. Because, I could live in a hole under a rock and have the best software on the planet. And if I'm satisfied with that and I can buy my groceries with that, good enough.
Right.
So that taste on the tongue is what I hear you saying now. And I'm trying to say, guys, listen to John.
Well, thank you for that confirmation. I appreciate that. So a taste on the tongue, I actually really like that. That's a great way to, to say what we're looking for.
Costco, farmers market, everywhere.
Yes. How many of you that have interviewed for job software positions went in and demanded to code for them? Anybody? Anybody go in and demand code for them? Demand to pair or demand to write code for them right at that spot? Tell you what, you walk into my business and you want a job and you tell me you demand to code right in front of me, I'm going to hire you. I don't care if your coding is great or not. The coding can come. But if you have that confidence in yourself, if you're that much of a craftsman, yeah, you got a job.
Can that same methodology be true to basically any industry? If the tool of the trade is the ability to write a line of code, is that something where you come in where you want to be able to demonstrate what you can do? Again, the taste on the tongue.
I'm gonna flip that question and ask you: is there any industry that you can't have them do that? You can't have them come in and do their job, or you can't go in and demand to show them your skills.
There's not an industry that doesn't have the ability for an audition.
Right.
And to be prepared with the audition, but if they push back, you don't provide it, then at least you allow them the opportunity to know that you're ready to be able to provide this audition.
Yes.
I think that's your only way, unless you're walking in there with a reputation.
Right.
Unless you're there and you have
That reputation means somebody's already tasted. You're
Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
Yes.
They've seen you. Yeah.
Yeah, they know.
Yep. When I start a new project, I have a team that I hire, and it's just there's no interviewing, there's none of that. It's just here's the team, because I know that as soon as they're in place, we're gonna get the ground running. When you bring in new people, you have to make sure they're forward for the team. But that's the other side of the equation. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. So showing your skills, taste on the tongue. Okay, demand it. If you walk in there and you say, I want code, can I pair with one of your developers? Can I show you my skills? That's going to make a huge impact. You're trying to stand out from the crowd. Guess what that's going to do for you? Winner. How she would say, winning. Okay, last one. How many of you ever seen the movie The Last Dragon? Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon? It was this incredibly forgettable 80s, like spoof Bruce Lee thing. But actually, it was kind of cool because it actually talked about, it had a core truth around mastery. Okay? What we're talking about here, and we say, who's the master? Get a mentor. Get somebody that's going to be able to coach you into the business. Okay? I claim, I take people that I'm mentoring, and I claim every single victory of theirs. I have nothing to do with it, other than I just happen to every once in a while get the right word at the right time. But, I can see that there's an impact as a mentor, and I learned a ton from them. How many of you know who Hala is? Hala Saleh? Okay, so Hala is actually one of the people I've mentored for a few years now in the Agile business, not in software development per se. And now she's a rock star up in Pacific Northwest. She just left here recently. She's ran a couple of startups. She has done her own consulting career. And the mentoring relationship, actually, it wasn't just the fact that I could tell her, this is good, this is bad, do this, don't do this. It was actually the relationships that made a difference too. So find yourself a mentor. Find somebody you can work with and have them guide you. Okay? You find the right person, they may hire you themselves. It's a powerful thing to be able to walk up to somebody and say, I want to learn from you, and I'm willing to put time and energy into it to do that. You guys have all seen old Kung Fu movies, right? You have to stay there for like weeks, sitting in the rain, waiting for the master to accept you as assistants. I mean, same thing, except, you don't have to be in the rain. So that's the employment side of it. That's where if you want to, if you're the one that's trying to get in the door, that's the advice for you.